Those of you who don't know, I'm the younger son, which means I get to follow the Ave Maria and that. Where do I begin to sum up the life of my father? I think it's best to do it with stories. He was a man of few words, but they were always well chosen. Throughout my life, it was fascinating to see people react to him. You might have thought he was gruff, stern, and intense, and you're not wrong. But he was also one of the funniest people I've ever met. His quick wit, sense of humor, and irony, and the ability to see things that didn't match made him an amazing person to sit next to when you were people watching. I remember being in high school, and we were going to the grocery store. My dad said, "Come on, let's go visit the food." In the town we lived in, there was a school that taught all the leader dogs for the blind. So you'd often see people walking around the town training these dogs. They were everywhere, and the town was very supportive. Anyway, we walked up to the grocery store, and there was a sign out front that said, "Leader dogs for the blind, welcome." My dad looked at me with a smile, and he said, "Who reads that?" He was sensitive, forgiving, cerebral. But as my brother said, certain things really confused him, like Civil War reenactments and boiled peanuts. People tell me that they can't believe he took apart bombs in his early military, and his early military training was with the SEALs. Well, I can tell you that he did, because my childhood was a lot like an abbreviated SEAL training. If you think of a bomb specialist as a muscle-bound adrenaline junkie, you've got it wrong. They're intelligent, strategic, stoic, and calculating. Sound familiar? They have a makeup that others just don't have. They view each situation differently than others. Here's an example. During my dad's military training, my father and 5 or 6 others were loaded onto a helicopter and taken 4 or 5 miles offshore. They rappelled out of the chopper into the water, then the helicopter just flew away. They didn't know what they were supposed to do next. How long were they supposed to be there? Were they supposed to work together? Were they supposed to try to swim to shore? Was the helicopter coming back? The whole exercise was mental. I asked what happened next. He said, well, a couple of the guys really freaked out. A couple others tried to organize a plan. I said, Dad, what did you do? He looked at me and said, I rolled over on my back and took a nap. In fact, he told me later that he thought military service should be mandatory for all, not for the reason you think, but he thought more people needed to know how to perfectly recon and navigate a buffet so they didn't hold up the line. My dad didn't let small things linger in his mind. Most of us get nervous about small things every day, and it slows us down. In my opinion, in a compressed portion of his life, he saw so many inhumane things that, as he used to say, everything else is gravy. How was he as a teacher? I'll give you an example. Towards the end of college, I went to a program at the UN in New York. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. About 3 days before I was to come home, I called him and said, hey, Dad, I ran out of money. Is there any way you could wire me some? He asked 3 questions. Do you have a place to stay? Yes. Do you have a plane ticket home? Yes. Do you have a ride to the airport? Yes. He simply said, figure it out, and hung up. He didn't solve your problems. He simply had a way of showing you that what you thought of as a problem wasn't. After graduation, I came home and I was all excited. I relayed to my father that I had a great job lined up. Out of 1,800 people, I was handpicked to drive the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. I told him the good news, and I was met with, I paid for you to go to college so you could drive around the country in a giant hot dog handing out whistles. Needless to say, he encouraged me to pursue other avenues. Years ago, I posted something on my father's Facebook page to thank him on Veterans Day. I explained the three phases of being a father: superhero, father, and friend. When your kids are babies, they idolize their mom and dad. That's the superhero phase. Then comes being a father. You teach them, you discipline them, and you're not always well liked. The third phase is the hardest. You try to become their friend right after they hated you and wanted nothing to do with you. It's so hard to watch them and not correct them, but you have to let go so they can fly. My father didn't want us to fail, but he allowed us to fail because he knew we would learn. In my case, my children still view me as a superhero, and I look forward to the other phases. Some men experience one phase or maybe two, if they're lucky. My dad was the trifecta. He was my hero, my father, and in the end, my friend. The day before he died, we were sitting around telling stories and juggling between laughing and crying, which I think is the best emotion in the world. And my mother told me a story I had never heard. My father's parents didn't have a lot of money. They got by, but they were not well off. At the age of 18 or 19, my father bought an insurance policy on himself. So if anything happened to him, his parents would get some money. Think about that for a minute. That's everything you need to know about Mike Morrison. He thought of others first. It's except at dinner. He always got the biggest piece of chicken. Even at the very end, when I explained to him where things stood, that the cancer was too far gone and there was nothing we could do to save him, he simply said, I understand. Looked at my mother and said, she's been through enough. Later that day, I called one of his high school friends, John Lindsay, to tell him that his friend Mike was on his way. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't offer condolences. I just heard him smile through the phone, and he simply said, what a life. What a life.